Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In a city in England, there was a 25-year-old young man who was very well known in his community as a Christian and an active pastor. Tom was often invited to participate in religious forums. He was known as a young pastor who was authoritative, able to explain the concepts of the Christian religion in a way that was easy to understand and attracted many people who attended his events, impressed by his explanations. Tom's ability made him often chosen to represent the Christian community in various interfaith meetings, including public debates on religious issues. One day, Tom received an invitation that caught his attention. The invitation came from the organizer of a fairly important religious debate event in his city. The theme of this debate was the comparison between Islam and Christianity, a topic that was familiar to Tom, as he was often involved in such discussions. He felt this was a golden opportunity to show the courage of his faith to the wider community with enthusiasm. It was a big moment in his journey as a pastor. He also felt ready to face Yazid, the man who would be the representative of the Muslim side. In the final debate, the venue was filled with thousands of spectators from various backgrounds, all waiting for the exchange of ideas promised by the event. On one side, Tom stood with confidence, while his opponent, Yazid, gave a faint smile, giving the impression that he was ready to moderate the issues. "Tom, we have faith in our scriptures, and this is clearly mentioned in our holy book," he said. The audience listened attentively. Tom's very authoritative speaking style succeeded in attracting everyone's attention. He also touched on some of the differences between Islam and Christianity, offering his arguments in a clear yet sharp manner. When it was Yazid's turn to answer, Tom cleverly provoked his opponent with several questions that seemed simple, but were designed to spark debate. Yazid answered calmly, but Tom managed to steer the debate, making Yazid seem a little unsure when the moderator gave him extra time to conclude his point. Tom made good use of it and ended his delivery with a statement that made some of the audience applaud. Up to that moment, Tom seemed to dominate the debate, excelling in the opening session. However, when it was Yazid's turn to speak, the atmosphere in the room, which had been filled with debate and sharp statements, suddenly became silent. All eyes were focused on Yazid, who looked calm and unhurried. In the tense silence, he began to say a few words in Arabic, in a low voice but full of solemnity. Then Yazid melodiously read a verse from the Quran. "Truly you, Muhammad, will not be able to give guidance to those you love, but Allah gives guidance to those He wishes, and He knows better those who wish." Receiving guidance from the Quran, Surah Al-Qasas, verse 56, Yazid's voice is so clear, and there is a deep meaning in these words. The verse not only talks about who can give guidance, but also reminds us of Allah's absolute will to provide guidance to whom He wills. Tom, who previously really believed in his argument, felt a little disturbed for a moment. His heart was a little moved, even though he tried to cover up his feelings with a small laugh, as if mocking the Muslim man. In his heart, he felt that his debate opponent was avoiding him and trying to divert his attention from the main topic. But in the midst of the ridicule that was spinning in his mind, there was something strange in him that started to feel different. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was peace in the reading of the verse. After the opening session, which was full of tension, it was now Yazid's turn to speak. But instead of immediately responding to Tom's argument, Yazid remained silent for a moment, bowed his head, and then said, "Bismillah." The atmosphere in the building became silent. All eyes were focused on Yazid, waiting for the argument he would present to Tom. But unfortunately, it was the opposite of what the audience wanted. Yazid instead began reciting a verse from the Quran, namely Surah Al-Qasas, verse 56. Tom, who heard the reading, laughed a little. He raised his eyebrows, showing an expression of disbelief. "Is that all?" Tom asked, turning to the moderator and some of the audience, as if underestimating his debating opponent. Small laughter could be heard from several corners of the room, especially from Tom's supporters. "I think we are in a debate, not a recitation. If my opponent just reads a verse without giving a clear argument, doesn't that mean he actually doesn't have an answer to my argument?" Some of the audience laughed again, and Tom smiled broadly, feeling like he had won the point. His mind didn't shake from the logical challenge that had been posed previously. Tom continued to believe, and instead of getting bothered, he relaxed, convinced that he had overcome the problem. However, Yazid did not get lazy with the ridicule, nor did he seem bothered by the laughter from Tom and some of the audience. He just smiled, waiting for his next turn to continue the conversation with Tom. This attitude was seen as a sign of weakness. Tom considered Yazid unable to answer his challenge. In his heart, he felt that victory was almost in his hands, but without realizing it, something from the reading of the verse began to linger in his mind, even if only for a moment after a long process in the end. Ang ya ituadadano, kayan berdikano maji in hand. Ituwanyand, Yangying is more about the verse that Yazid recited. After a moment of hesitation, he sat down in front of his computer and started typing in the search engine. Surah Al-Qasas, verse 56. Tom Macca's translation tries to make the meaning of the words in the verse feel like a deep alignment that is different from the logical arguments he usually faces in debate. There is something to the message. At-Nichul brings a person belief, but this verse states that guidance is something that only God gives to anyone who is in this situation, with per that Waliked. Since finding the meaning and understanding of the verse that Yazid read, his mind constantly clashed with the interpretation that was originally written in the verses, which in most cases are quite touching. Tom's message is very important, but in this case, he relies on logic and arguments for approaching spiritual problems. However, the verse of Surah Al-Qasas taught him that there was something great in human ability, UNT. There was something that pulled him closer in a direction he had never imagined before. Tom finally couldn't hold back his question. Is religion Yangle iniaandanga gaiwan bat in his back? Tumul terjahan Quran Yukami page with a changing the meaning of valid words, ala dunkin to godalit danan after death. The verses that spread, he discovered how Islam brings noble morals, justice, and love for others, values that he had previously considered as the foundation of his belief and faith, when he discovered more and more similarities between Islamic teachings and values. The values that this cell he holds, the concept of love for justice and obedience to God. In his quest, he began to read diligently, noting important points about Islam, and even watched lectures about to understand more about Islam. He didn't rush to conclusions, but his heart slowly began to accept that there was something very special in the teachings that he had always looked down on. In his quest, he began to read diligently, noting important points about Islam, and even watched lectures about to understand more about Islam. He didn't rush to conclusions, but his heart slowly began to accept that there was something very special in the teachings that he had always looked down on. Every night he sat in his living room with the Bible in one hand and a translation of the Quran in the other. He reads, compares, and ponders the question that continues to haunt his mind. If I am really looking for the truth, why do I obey what I learned from my childhood? Starting with the fact that he has found the true peace that he felt before this belief, he believes that if his decision to follow Islam's teachings was his, then after months of confusion and questions that haunted Tom's final thoughts, he found his answer. Siyukil kapusan tomananah dian ima mangdud isis unya, inil j yang hanela isu. With a sincere heart and with sincere efforts, someone can feel how great Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. In the end, it becomes just a guarantee that Allah's hidayah is all right. And in Man Sajadak or Ale, he teaches us to continue to seek the truth with a clean, open, and humble heart. Because whoever is serious will be met with the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, more or less. Please forgive me if there are any errors in the presentation which have the impression and the objection from me, and Ben is just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the end of our video. If you enjoy Islamic content like this, don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next video.